So I've been taught to teach the second part in French, right?
Bien sûr.
Alors c'est parti. No, I'm kidding. So anybody has a clue on what is the order of magnitude of this guy?
I would bet 10 to the power of 3
Three quarters.
But
N to the 3/4. Another bet.
2/3.
N to the 2/3. Another one. They prefer to escape, not to give any bet. You win. But now you have to explain.
Okay, I tried some interpolative thing where if you have k to the minus 5 halves, it's basically like the minimal finite moment it could possibly have is like the 3 halves moment. So then you kind of reciprocate that and you get 2/3.
You come from chemistry? No, but actually that's how it works. You're right. So that's n to the 2/3. True, you've got a 3/2 moment, but let me give you a more down-to-earth and more probabilistic way to see this 2/3. Okay. So first of all, something that is easy to see is what is the biggest of these values. Take each of these xi individually. What is the biggest in absolute value? That's very easy. Why? Because you are taking the maximum value of n guys, okay? And you know the tail probability. So what is the probability that the modulus of xi is bigger than k? Well, you need to sum this for k for this larger than k, so that's roughly speaking constant times k minus 3/2. That's the same 3/2 as yours. That means that if I take k such that k to the minus 3/2 is much lower than n, if I take n samples of this will never happen. Okay? On the contrary, if I take k such that k to the minus 3/2 is below n, since I take n independent values, then I will see this event appearing. So from this, that's very easy classical exercise that I leave to you to see that the maximum of the xi for I less than n is of order n to the 2/3. And that's where the 2/3 could come from, taking the maximum value here of these guys. So at least we have one guy which is of order n to the 2/3. So we could not expect having a rescaling factor by square root n. That's much too low. But on top of that, you could imagine that, okay, maybe some value is n to the 2/3, but maybe they kind of accumulate this value and need actually a variation which is bigger for this sum. One way to see that it doesn't is to do a second moment calculation, a truncated second moment calculation. So that's heuristic because I don't want, and I don't have time to give you all the details of this, but imagine that I take xi, which is xi indicator that the modulus of xi is less than n to the 2/3. Meaning that the values that are in absolute value bigger than n to the 2/3, I put them aside, right? Then how many of such values? A Poisson number. Because each of them has a probability roughly 1/n of being over n to the 2/3. There are n samples, it's Poisson limit, binomial Poisson limit. So there are a constant number of variables that I will treat apart. Now, once you do that, you can estimate actually what is the variance of Sn tilde. Sn tilde, which is just the sum of these truncated guys. They are still independent, so the variance of this is just the sum of the variance, which is just n times the variance of the first one. And what is the variance of the first one? That's roughly speaking, you need to sum this k squared over k minus 5/2 from k bigger than n to the 2/3. K lower than k to the 2/3, n to the 2/3, because I just truncated. And this is roughly, so this is 1 over square root k, 1 over square root k, which I sum up to n to the 2/3, it's n to the 1/3. Multiplied by n, this is n to the 4/3. So that tells me that the variance of these truncated guys is n to the 4/3. So what is the order of fluctuation? The square root of the variance. So n to the 2/3. So that tells me that Sn tilde is roughly of order n to the 2/3. And so I need just to take these single values which are bigger than n to the 2/3 to take them back, put them here, and in the end, I indeed have that Sn is of order n to the 2/3. Okay, don't copy this. This is just heuristic. But let me give you the theorem. And let me give you some details of it. So it's classical probability theory, but classical in Paris 6, let's say, for the stochastic calculus school. So theorem, classical theorem. So if Sn is the sum of IID random variables, such that so xi, they are IID, they are centered. In our case, xi cannot take positive value larger than 1. Let's say this. Xi is always less than 1. So on the positive side, the tail on the positive side is not a problem. And the tail on the negative side is asymptotic to k to the minus 5/2. Then we have the same statement. So S renormalized in time by n and in space by n to the 2/3. Converges towards, does somebody know what is here? It's L. What is L? Buckle your seatbelt. It's the spectrally negative stable Levy process of index 3/2. Who knew about this beast before? Of course, but except for the cameraman. So what is this guy? It's like Brownian motion, except that you replace half by 2 by 3/2. But that makes a huge difference, because this guy is a stochastic process that is now started from 0, but which has negative jumps. And actually, it has negative jumps always, all the way down. I mean, for each time interval, you will have negative jumps. So it's CAD-lag. CAD-lag means continu à droite and limité à gauche. Sorry for you guys. That's one point where the French have won CAD-lag. Continuous on the right and have limits on the left. Continuous on the right and have limits on the left. Cotlol. Ah, on Corlol. It's a CAD-lag. It's a Corlol process. So it looks like this. This is a jump. This is a jump where L of t minus is different from L of t, and it has a negative jump. So you may wonder in which sense does this convergence in distribution occur. It's not for the L infinity norm, because the L infinity norm is not very well suited to treat jumps. I will not enter the details. It's for the score code topology, but who cares? Just score code G1, yes?
Yeah, and if you kill the upper bound thing, you don't get the spectrally negative option, but then it still holds the same topology, or is there a different topology again?
No, score code, yeah.
Even if, okay.
Okay, so what you should remember from this theorem is just that we understand the scaling limit of random walks with independent increments exactly as in the setting of Donsker, but now that the limit process is not Brownian motion anymore, and that the scaling is not n to the 2/3, n to the half anymore. And one way to remember about these 2/3 is, what's your name? What's your name? Shannon. Shannon's way of remembering these 2/3 is by, no, but actually that's the good way to remember the guys, to check at which exponent, at which power you lose the integrability. And you take the inverse. Okay, one thing that is very important about this guy is, you know Poisson processes a bit? Who knows Poisson processes? They should know. You all know, so let me not give you the definition of L of t, but let me tell you that if you take the Poisson random measure of the time t, delta L of t, where delta L of t is non-zero, so you take the Poisson. Was this the setting of Poisson processes? You take random measures? What was the setting? No. So they have not seen Poisson processes then. They put infinite measure as well? No? You don't know Poisson process with infinite intensity measure? Okay, no, but you know Poisson process with finite intensity measure. Okay? So let me just take, but you don't have the notation with random measures, right? So what do they know about Poisson?
They know the Poisson point process with the finite density measure.
Okay, so for you Poisson process, you've got the line, you've got points, and you jump. This guy.
That's the non-differential.
Okay? Okay. So take here only jumps which are bigger than epsilon, right? And mark them by a cross. Here you've got a jump bigger than epsilon, here as well, here, maybe here, there. So this is for you a Poisson process. With intensity, which is constant times epsilon to the minus 3/2. And actually this can be obtained easily from the consideration that I developed here. Anyway, that's a beast that we know very well. we know how to make computations about it. And in particular, something which follows from this is the scaling property of Levy process. You know that Brownian motion has the scaling property. Recall for Brownian motion, if you accelerate time by a factor c, then that's the same as, you know a good way to remember the scaling property for Brownian motion? The variance. I see that you got the same approach. Brownian motion is square root. Square root of c t is square root of c times square root of t. As far as scaling is concerned, that's always the good way to proceed. Here, so that scaling property for Brownian motion with index 2. So here you have the same scaling property. If you accelerate time by factor c, then that will accelerate, that will dilate your space by factor c to the 2/3. So that's true in distribution. I don't tell you in which space, since I don't have time and the will to do that. Okay. So that's a scaling limit result for random walk with increments given by the law nu. Now let me, this is not what we are interested in. What we are interested in is the conditioned version of this walk. We want to condition this walk not to touch 0. We want to take the H transform. So in our setting,
Could I ask a
yes.
question? So
Yes, you
now
could.
what we are interested in from the beginning is the scaling limit of the perimeter of the infinite hole.
Yes. Yes.
Why we are interested in this?
Because of its application, because of next course. So remember that this has the law. Let me write it. S up arrow. That's the H transform. I'm just changing a bit notation. And so the variation of this theorem is the following. So it's due to Chaumont and Caravena, Caravena and Chaumont. Same hypothesis. But now the scaling limit of the condition walk, so it's the H transform. Same scaling, n to the 2/3. Convergence in distribution towards So, to your opinion, what is this beast? It's just the version of the spectrally negative stable Levy process of index 3/2 conditioned to stay positive. So it's the Levy blah 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 conditioned to stay positive. For 1 minute, this is not a trivial statement, not at all, because it's first, it's fairly recent. Second, just think about the same statement for Brownian motion. So you take a random walk, say the simple symmetric random walk, plus or minus 1. You condition it not to touch 0. So you take the H transform with the function H, which is x, H of x is x. That's the example we treated. Okay? So there is this Markov chain. Then, if the same thing is true, then you will have convergence of the walk condition to stay positive towards Brownian motion condition to stay positive. What is Brownian motion condition to stay positive? you know that Brownian motion, when started from 0, immediately touches negative value. Brownian motion immediately touches negative values. So what would be conditioning Brownian motion to stay positive? Again, that's an ill-defined conditioning, and you must regularize this conditioning to get a limit. So one way is to say you start Brownian motion from epsilon, you condition it not to touch 0, say up to time 1, and then you send epsilon to 0. Does somebody know what is the process that we get in the limit? What is the process describing Brownian motion condition not to touch 0?
Isn't it just absolute value?
No.
Three-dimensional Bessel process.
Indeed. How do you get that?
We did it last semester.
Okay, so actually there is one guy who has followed all the courses. Yes, so that's three-dimensional Bessel process. By the way, how do you define Bessel process of dimension 3?
You can take the magnitude of three-dimensional Brownian motion, or you could define it.
So now close the door. That's not the good way to define Bessel 3 process. But actually that's true, that's a coincidence.
You can define it as a solution to a certain SDE.
That's the good way to define Bessel process. That's a coincidence that it's the norm of the three-dimensional Brownian motion. Good way to define Bessel process is to say that Brownian motion condition not to touch 0. Bad way to define Bessel 3 process is to say it's the norm of a three-dimensional Bessel process. You can open the door. I don't know, in case of the teacher pass by. So in the end, yes, that's the analogous of the Bessel 3 process. Who was the teacher? That's you? No. Close your ear. Okay, so that there is the same amount of work to define this guy from the Levy process as to define the Bessel 3 process from Brownian motion. What you need to understand is just that we understand this guy and that it has the same scaling property exactly as Bessel process has the scaling property of index 2. This guy has, again, the scaling property of order 3/2. So let me now give you one consequence with a very nice, what I think a very nice probabilistic tool that you may, I'm pretty sure that you don't know, but you could have done in undergrad. So corollary of all of this, any filled in, so it's copyright Matan, pinning exploration so a filled-in exploration, I recall, is a guy like this under this very same probability measure, so the UIPQ measure, will eventually discover everything. Meaning that you have the union of all these exploration guys. That's the underlying map, almost surely. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? That's not trivial at all. This statement is not trivial at all. So imagine that you start with your guy of perimeter 2L, and you start your pinning process. You start discovering what is outside this guy. Okay, so you may discover a face like this, then maybe a face like that, then a face like this. Then you may peel this edge that you find that it's the same. You have a finite hole here that you filled in with the proper Boltzmann map. Then you go on, maybe you peel here, you see that, maybe that. Then you peel here, you see something like that. Up. Now you peel here, you see these two edges are identified. You've got a hole here that you fill, and so on. It could very well be the case that imagine you peel always towards that direction. That does not mean anything, but just to imagine you want to peel towards that direction. Okay, so you discover stuff like that, maybe like this, and like that, then like this, and this is identified, and so on. It could be very, very much be the case that you never discover this part. Say, okay, I always want to peel towards this. Who tells you that you will discover this edge eventually? I tell you. I tell you that even if you are at the opposite, this is the boundary. Okay? Even if you want to peel the edge which is opposite to that one, that at some point you will swallow this edge. Okay? So let me turn this into probability. So what could go wrong? Exactly the same phenomenon as in a lemma that we established, you know, tau r is finite. That when we peel along the metric exploration, we discover all the vertices. So what could go wrong? It could be that some vertex, say V, belongs to the boundary of the field exploration for all n bigger than some n0. Meaning that that's you started from this, and this is your current infinite hole. Could be that some vertex here will never be an internal vertex of your filled-in exploration. It could indeed be the case because imagine that I'm peeling at that edge. Well, maybe I swallow some part here, some part there, but could be that I never swallow this vertex. Let's do a simple calculation. So the perimeter of this guy is partial En over line. I claim that whatever the location of the peeling edge, this red guy, whatever the location, I have got some small but uniform probability to swallow this guy. Okay. What is the worst case scenario? If my peeling edge is just there, then I've got roughly probability, say, a constant to do a peeling step that swallows this in my finite hole, and V will be swallowed and will be an internal vertex. What is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is when my peeling edge is some kind of opposite to this vertex. Okay? Then what is the probability that this turns into something like that? So what is the probability that V is internal to En plus 1? Okay, so if I'm totally opposite, I must make an identification of this edge, say with an edge somewhere here, either this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, say one of these, and that this is my finite hole. So the probability to do this is roughly, in the worst case, I must make a jump meaning that I must swallow a part of my boundary, which is at least half of the boundary. So say K is roughly from En over 2 to say En 3/4. Right? That's the half of my boundary, that's 3/4. Half of my boundary, 3/4. So if I make an identification of this edge with one of these, then I will swallow this guy. What is the probability to make such an identification? We know it by heart. We know it's nu to the minus k. That's the size of the negative jump. That's the negative jump in the perimeter, times the ratio of this H transform. I'm a bit rough here. It's rough. Okay? What is this? Remember that H is roughly square root. So here I have square root of K is of order of my perimeter. K is of the same order of this guy. So that's square root of roughly delta En bar. So this is roughly a constant. Or at least bigger than some constant. And this is roughly K to the minus 5/2. So in the end, all of this is, I have roughly delta En values. This is delta En bar to the minus 5/2 times delta En, which is the same thing to the minus 3/2. Okay? So what I have proved so far is if you give me a point on the boundary, irrespectively of my peeling edge, I've got a probability of this order to swallow this point in the next peeling step. Okay? That's small, right? When delta En is large, that's a small probability. So what do we need to prove? If we want to prove that the exploration will eventually discover everything, we need to prove that we swallow each vertex V like this. So yes, exactly. We want to prove, it's sufficient to prove. So it is sufficient to prove. Here I leave some details under the carpet. Sufficient to prove that the sum of these guys is infinite, almost surely. Right? It's a kind of conditional Borel-Cantelli lemma, which I leave up to you. So if you wish, this is an estimate on the rate of growth of this perimeter. So far, we only know that this guy goes to infinity, almost surely. Right? That's what we proved. But we proved with the other lemma, with the proposition, the theorem I just erased, that this guy is roughly of order n to the 2/3. N to the 2/3 to the minus 3/2. 1 over n. 1 over n, or 1 over n. We are exactly on the border, right? So I'll give for you, because it's nice and because I know how to prove it, a very nice lemma, which you may give to your future student. So it's called Jelin's lemma, Thierry Jelin. Jelin's lemma, and which is the following. So imagine that I have a series f of n, this is a function, deterministic function, times xn, this is a random variable. And I suppose that xn converges in distribution towards a continuous random variable xi, which is strictly positive almost surely. Notice that I imposing nothing on the xn. They may be dependent, they may be independent, they may be correlated. They are just on the same probability space. Okay? Just what I'm imposing is that they converge in distribution, that's very weak, not almost surely, just in distribution towards some distribution, which is positive. Then if the series of f of n diverges, that implies that almost surely the random series fn xn is infinite. That may seem very easy, and I'm tempted either to leave it for you as an exercise for the week, just to see if you manage to do it, because once you know the proof, it's 2 lines, really 2 lines. But so who votes for give me the proof now, I cannot stand up, or give me 1 week, I want to think about that? Who wants the proof now? Who wants the proof next week? Fair enough. Okay. Okay, so I'll give the proof next week. But don't go on the internet. Of course, if you should have not said Jelin's lemma. No, it's no, Curien's lemma. Sorry, Curien's lemma. No. No. Erase from your mind Jelin's lemma and try to make a proof for your own. So let's see how to use this there. Here, let me rewrite this as delta En divided by n to the 3/2 times 1 over n. So far, so good. This has the same distribution as the H transform of the walk at time n divided by n to the 2/3. Because for each n, it has as a process, it has the same distribution. So for each n, it has the same distribution. And we have seen from the theorem of Caravena-Chaumont, actually it's an easy consequence, but since you don't know square code topology, I cannot tell you the proof. This converges towards the the Levy process, the 3/2 Levy process condition, blah, 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 blah. That's part of the theorem. And actually, this exactly as in the case of Brownian motion, if you condition Brownian motion not to touch 0, it will not touch 0. The Bessel 3 is never 0. It's the same here. If you condition the Levy process not to touch 0, it will not touch 0. It will obey you. Okay, you condition. So this guy is strictly positive. Okay, so you're exactly in the setup of Jolin's lemma with the function f of n, which is 1 over n, and xn is just this renormalized guy. So you can apply Jolin's lemma and deduce that this random series is infinite almost surely, which is our goal. Okay? Okay. Now we have a splitting event with two holes. Either I give you a nice consequence of this fact that the peeling swallows everything, involving random walks, or I jump into percolation. Anyway, I will do percolation and metric exploration next week, so okay, I'll do random walks. Okay. Let me do a corollary of this then, involving random walks. Who was present in Les Diablerets? Everybody? Because I'll tell you that everything has been planned for 2 years for this particular course. I will use the talk I gave in Les Diablerets for this part. So a consequence on random walk. Random walk on planar maps. Not random walk on Z. So here is the theorem. So it's due to, it's a consequence of a theorem of Benjamini and Schramm in 2001. But I'll give an alternative proof. So consider the random map M under the very same probability measure. So it's this guy. Have sweet dreams, huh? These guys with external boundary of length 2L and an infinite number of vertices. And let En be simple random walk on the dual of M. Sorry, I was using the notation Q because it's a quadrangulation with a boundary. So what do I mean by simple random walk on the dual of a quadrangulation? So imagine you've got your quadrangulation, I don't know, something like this. Okay, so you've got the root edge. Let's say this is not. Yeah. So you've got the root edge. I don't know. Say this one. So you've got the root face. This one, and the simple random walk on the dual will walk on the dual. Okay, it starts from the root face, which is the origin of the dual map, and then walks using edges of the dual. Say I walk there, then back here, then there, then here, then there, here, then I will take this edge, then this one, then there. You see? Is that clear? And this process are the edges visited by the walk. Okay, so first I sample my map, and second I sample a simple random walk on it. Then theorem, then it is recurrent. M is almost surely Q, sorry, recurrent. So, in words, I'm just saying that the dual of the UIPQ is recurrent. Not the UIPQ itself, because I'm not walking on the edges, but on the dual. For the connoisseur, this follows from Benjamin-Schramm theorem, and the fact that the UIPQ itself is recurrent, going from the dual to the primal, it's not a piece of cake, and it's a theorem of Gurel, Gurevich, and Armias. But the proof I will give here for this is totally different. So proof. Okay. So remember my, I will use first a theorem of Benjamin-Schramm, but 96, not 01, and a theorem of Benjamini, Curien, and Georgakopoulos. So Benjamin-Schramm, '96, Benjamini, myself, and Georgakopoulos. Couple of years ago, 10, 11. So for planar graph, we have the following equivalence. So planar graph, say Q. So Q is recurrent. That's a deterministic statement. Q is recurrent. Q has no bounded harmonic function, no non-trivial, and Q has the intersection property. So let me recall what is the intersection property. The intersection property is if you start the walk from 2 points, x and y, then the trajectory of your walk, these are independent walks, then the trajectory will intersect, almost surely. So almost surely, trajectories of independent walks intersect. So that's equivalent by Benjamin-Schramm 96 in the case of bounded degree. For planar graph of bounded degree, recurrence and Liouville property is the same. That is exactly why I'm going on the dual, because the dual has bounded degree. The dual of a quadrangulation is a quadrivalent graph, each vertex at degree 4, so I've got this equivalence. And this is the theorem I presented in Les Diableret, which is true in general. So using this, yes? Intersection property is you start two simple random walk independent from 2 points, then the trajectories will intersect. So So if I use these two theorems, then if I want to prove recurrence, I only have to prove intersection property. Okay? And I will prove something stronger. I will prove surrounding property. We will prove something stronger. Under this infinity, we will prove that under this measure, I've got my root face here. Then if I take the trajectory of one simple random walk on the dual, then I will close loops around the origin. Oops, sorry, the origin is somewhere here. You see what I'm describing? The walk on the planar graph will surround the origin by cycles, surround the origin by loops, by infinitely many loops. Okay? It will be clearer what I mean afterwards. But clearly, if a walk does that, and if you start another walk, then they are bound to intersect, because this one cannot stay in this finite region. It's a random walk on the graph, intersect. Okay? Think of random walk on Z2. The random walk on Z2 will do this kind of surrounding the origin infinitely many times, and so it has the intersection property, without speaking of recurrence. Okay. How are we going to prove such a result? What have I done for the last 10 hours, 8 hours?
And the fact that you solve every point infinitely many times.
We will use a peeling process. So we will use a peeling process. So let me first describe what is the peeling process that we will use, and you should be a bit hurted. You should feel not comfortable when I'm describing this. So here is the peeling process that we will use. Roughly speaking, we discover the map along the walk on the dual. Let me first give you an example, and then we'll see precisely what is the algorithm. So we start with the root face, which has some degree. I don't know. Let's put 6 on this example. That's the root face. And so the random walk is located here. That's the random walk. It's a she. She wants to move. Where does she want to move? She says, oh, I want to take this edge. Okay? So what should I do? I should discover the map for her to know where she is landing. So if she wants to move there, then I'm peeling this edge. Imagine that I discover something like that, a face like this. So the random walks ends up here. Okay? She wants to move again. Let's say she wants to move towards that edge. Then I discover, say, a face like that. That's a quadrangle. Okay? Then she moves there. She wants to move again. Whoa, she's really energetic. She wants to move that way. Then I do a pinning step here. That's the finite region, say the infinity is here, which I will immediately reveal. So it's just a Boltzmann map with the proper perimeter. So I reveal it. I mean, there are some quadrangles. I know what it is. Okay? Then inductively, what do? I let the simple random walk move, and when necessary for her to displace, I will trigger a pinning step. So imagine that she wants to discover a bit this region. Fair enough, I know where she is, I know the map. If she comes back on the boundary of what we have discovered so far, say here, now I need to trigger a new pinning step. And she lands here. Maybe she goes back into the known region, and so on and so forth. Okay? So more precisely, we will do a filled-in pinning process. So that we will denote E0, E1, up to En, so forth, so on and so forth. So that what is En? At this stage, what is En? Well, if you remember my notation with the little dot, when I have a submap, remember I can always speak of the dual submap. And here the dual submap is just made of those edges of the walk, EI, so these are the edges of the walk EI that the walk has been going through, which is filled. Meaning that if I have a finite hole, then I plug the finite map inside. This is not for I less than n, because if I do that for I less than n, then sometimes the En does not change. For example, if the walk is there and does one step, then the En is not changing. So let's time change this, theta of n, so that this is a strictly increasing sequence. Roughly speaking, what is En? En is what we call the hull of the range of the walk up to time theta of n. Theta of n is just here to make the hull evolve at each time step. Okay? Is it clear on the picture, at least, what I'm doing? So I have only, at each step, I have only one hole, because I'm filling in all the finite holes I'm discovering on the way. Okay. And now I should see a hand raising like energetically. But Mr. Oh, better, Professor. No. No problem for you. Yeah, go on. So far,
About the fact that it's not metric algorithm.
It's not metric algorithm, it's not a deterministic algorithm. So far for pinning process, a pinning process was given by an algorithm. I was giving you a deterministic algorithm and you were pinning with this deterministic algorithm A. remember? This A. This algorithm here involves randomness. It involves a simple random walk. Is it a legal peeling? Before, a peeling was given by an algorithm A that takes a submap and gives an edge on the holes of this submap. It's not the case there, because it involves an additional randomness. So is it legal, what I'm doing? The answer is yes, since I'm doing it, but the good question is why?
Can you maybe put this randomness in like using the algorithm?
Exactly. One way to see that is to say, this is a randomized algorithm, it uses randomness. Okay? The randomness of the walk. So this is a randomized algorithm. Because it uses the random walk. And what is nasty is that the random walk some way uses the map. But actually, there is a way to see this algorithm and to put all the randomness into some omega. So think of omega as, I don't know, independent IID uniform variables. And I want to put all this randomness into the omega, and this randomness should not use anything from the map E. How could I do that? In the case of random walk, that's fairly easy. Why? Because you may say that a random walk on M is the sequence of the edges that you see. So random walk on this, you may say, oh, that's the sequence EI, but just to define this EI, I need the map to say this is this one, and then this one, and then this one. But actually, imagine that instead of giving you the sequence of edges EI, I give you a bunch of random variables, which are IID uniform, and for you, just uniform variables belonging to 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I create for you a walk, because if you are on a quadrangulation, okay? Imagine you start from here, and you have that's your root face, and that's your dual root edge. Now, from a sequence of yes, no. I want functions from n into, yes, that's this. Okay, so I have an element like this, omega, and I claim that with this element omega, if I give you a map, you create a random walk. How? You say, okay, I'm here, that's my edge number 1, then that's edge number 2, that's edge number 3, that's edge number 4. I take the first guy of my omega, say it's 1. Then my walk moves there. Okay? Now I look backwards. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. I look at my second element in my omega, say it's 2, and I move that way. I'm here, I look that way. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. I look at the element in my omega, the third element, say it's 4. I'm here, and so on and so forth. That's one way to encode. You see what I'm doing? I'm just telling you that, yes?
It's an deterministic part of our algorithm to describe it. So it's random parts of our algorithm.
The problem with this, the algorithm as I described here, is that it uses the AI. What I want to do is to decouple the part that is encoded by the map and the part that is encoded by the walk. And what I'm doing is roughly factorizing the randomness of the random walk into something that does not depend on the map. Okay? So imagine just that a walk on, if I give you a map and if I give a quadrangulation and if I give you a sequence of numbers with values in 1, 2, 3, 4, you can create the walk. You believe me or not? One way is to say, okay, at each step I take the edge number 1, 2, 3, 4, starting from the edge I've just taken. Okay? Yes?
Actually, it should be 1, 2, 3, 4 to N. 2, 2, N if we are in outside phase.
Ah, yes. Yes, totally correct. I did uniform 0, 1 so that this problem is solved. Uniform 0, 1.
Yes.
See if you have Lebesgue 0, 1, you can choose any coin flip. Sure, totally correct. Okay? Just to say that now this algorithm, instead of saying this algorithm as E depending on AI, I can see this algorithm depending on the explored map and omega, say in 0, 1 to the n. Okay? And now, if you fix omega, that's a deterministic algorithm. Okay? Yes?
So this clearly works because this is a regular graph. So if I were to, let's say, instead of looking at quadriangulation, look at like mixture of quadrilateral and triangulations, for example.
Take 0, 1 to the n.
No, but the issue is that then you need to know whether the face is, the notion of which face you're at depends on the map. You can't just say that I'm going to...
No. If you know where you are, you know what's the degree of your face. And you know that you came from this one. Then with your omega k, which is a random number in 0, 1, you can choose if it's between 0 and 1/3, you go back this one. Between 1/3 to 1/3, this one. Okay? So the key is to say, okay, this algorithm, I can write it like that. And for omega fixed, this is a deterministic algorithm. Okay? What have I gained? What is nice is that now you can work into two steps. You say, first step, choose omega, say, according to Lebesgue to the n. That's your omega. Second step, so that fixes for you the algorithm A point omega. This algorithm. Second step, independently of this first step, you choose M, the map M, under your favorite probability measure. And peel it using A dot omega. Since these two guys are independent, it's as if you were peeling with a deterministic algorithm, because it's as if you choose before the algorithm and then you choose the map, and you peel it with a deterministic algorithm. Okay? So it's totally legal because we managed to decouple the randomness of the peeling algorithm and the randomness of the map into two independent randomness. Okay? Okay, it's a bit formal, but really think about it 5 minutes and you'll see that it's totally kosher what I'm doing.
To be totally correct, we need to say that the limiting of the UIPQ is independent of the algorithm that we are fitting.
It's here. Actually,
No. I mean, I give you a deterministic algorithm. The object is the same because we proved the convergence. I mean, the flow that we came through, we used one algorithm to prove that this is the same object as the limit.
I've not proved a posteriori that the pinning under.
A different algorithm would give you the same object.
I've not proved that.
Yeah, we need that.
Okay, that was in the recap actually. In the recap, you should have told me that in the very beginning of the course. When I did the recap, I said this works for any pinning algorithm of the UIPQ. But check it. I mean, that's. Okay, so put it in the next tutorial. Yes.
You do need continuity with respect to the local topology, but that's everything.
No, because he's right. I should have done that before. I should have said that if you do the peeling process under this, that works for any algorithm. How was defined this guy? This guy was defined as the limit for the A-metric algorithm. So I had the probability transition under the A-metric algorithm. But I should have said this is just two lines. Take another algorithm, you know convergence, another algorithm under PL, you know convergence for this algorithm, so that gives you the peeling process under this one. Put it in the next tutorial. Or if you prefer, the probability transition I was describing in the very beginning of the course, they work for any peeling algorithm of under this measure.
Don't you mean like having some algorithm? We had an issue that we shouldn't peel like the opposite edge.
That's for the half plane, yes. The local, yeah.
So we don't.
Yeah, and that works as well in the half plane because actually I forgot if I said that the peeling is local. Okay, let's not talk about the half plane, but that works as well. Where was I? Okay, so now we decouple the randomness of the walk and the randomness of the map, so we have a totally legal peeling algorithm. So we can just say that under P d omega P L infinity dm, okay? You first choose the omega with which you will peel the map, then you choose the map, then under this measure almost surely, actually they are independent, we have union of all these guys is equal to M. That's the theorem I just proved. That's the last corollary. Now let's just look geometrically on what does that mean. What does that mean that the peeling process along the simple random walk discover the full map? That is exactly the same as saying that the hull of the range of the first n edges, say, of the walk is the full map, because this is just a time change of this. Now I claim that geometrically this is exactly what I wanted. Because at some point, after some point, what do I have discovered? I have my root edge somewhere here, my root face here. I started my walk on the dual somewhere there. And I have the property that all the edges, all the faces that are on the boundary of my map have been visited by the walk. Okay? Now let's assume that the intersection property that I wanted to prove does not hold. What does that mean? That means that if I start a random walk from some point, there is a positive probability that, that these two walks, the red one and the green one, will not intersect. They cannot intersect. Right? Do you think that the range of the green one can discover the full map? No, it can't. Because it cannot intersect this. So this vertex, for example, this vertex can never be an internal vertex of the discovered map. No? What is intersection property? You need to show that if you start two walks, then they will intersect with positive probability. What I claim is that if you have two walks, so that's the first one. If they don't intersect, then the hull of this green guy cannot be the full map. Or the red one, it's symmetric. The hull of this one should also be the... Well, okay, you see what I mean. Okay? That's all. I have proved intersection property, and via the two theorems, I have proved recurrence of the dual of the UIPQ. Okay. 7 minutes. Okay. What I will do in these 7 minutes, no, I need to do that for you. Let's say it will be sufficient. Okay. So that's the first time we have used a randomized algorithm. We will do that with two other algorithms next week. And the key was to decouple the randomness of the map and the randomness of the algorithm and try to store these two randomness into two independent guys, one into omega and one into m. And once you manage to do that, then your peeling algorithm is totally kosher. Okay. So recap, what have we seen? We have seen that this process goes to infinity, but it's roughly n to the 2/3, and that we have a scaling limit. Let's not touch this board anymore. 4. Scaling limit for the volume. So we understood what is the perimeter of the unique hole containing the infinite component under this measure. Let's try to understand the volume of the guy. So what is the volume of En So the volume, which I denote by bars En, is the number of vertices inside, so not on the boundary, internal vertices, say, inside En. How does that evolve? So remember, it will be the 10 times I'm describing the probability transition. Maybe after 10 times, more or less clear, it will be even clearer than once perfectly. Prefer to do 10 times so rather than one perfectly okay. So that if somebody sleeps during the only time where I am describing it, it still has a chance to catch up. Okay, so what are the probability transitions? You pick your edge. Here, either you discover something like this. What is delta of En here? 0. Or I discover something like this. And here I have a finite Boltzmann map. What is delta of En here? It's the number of vertices inside here, so inside a planar map M distributed as PL, where this is 2L. It's just the volume of a Boltzmann planar map. What is the proposition that I want to tell you about? So let theta B equal je ne sais pas, some number exercise you'll see, and let psi be the random variable with density e to the minus 1 over 2x, x to 5 halves square root 2 pi for positive x dx. Yes, natural, because if you differentiate with respect to x, you've got the stable half stable variable. Then we have, if you take the expectation under the Boltzmann measure L, perimeter L, and you look at the volume of your map, this is equal to, which is asymptotic when L goes to infinity, B times L squared. And if you look under the probability measure PL, and you look at the volume of your map, you rescale by L squared, then this converges in distribution towards B times this random variable, psi. So let's do an easy exercise and guess what the B is. So what is B? What is this? Let's come back to the definition. You sum over all map. Okay, I'm using M instead of Q, but there are all conjugation with boundary, but say, let's move to Q. This is a quadrangulation of the with perimeter 2L. This was sampled according to the Boltzmann measure, so it's 12 to the minus number of internal faces of Q. Here I want to take the volume of Q, and I want to normalize by the partition function. I'm just coming back to the definition. What was this probability measure? This probability measure is just this one. Oh, but this I already introduced for you. This is nothing but the pointed generating function, the W point L over WL. And these two guys, they had explicit expression. This was 8 to the L H down arrow of L, and this one was 8 to the L H up arrow divided by L plus 1, L plus 2, up to memory effect. So this is equal to something, because this is just H up arrow divided by 2L. I'll let you do the math. It's asymptotic to some constant that you call B times. So these two guys cancel, and you've got roughly L squared coming from these three factors here. Don't take it for granted. Go back to your course, and there are explicit numbers for these two. Okay, so what we see that if I give you perimeter 2L, then the number of vertices I have inside is L squared. Second convergence for you in tutorial. For you guys, you all in tutorial. 30 seconds to finish. What does that tell me? That tells me that when I have a drop of the perimeter of L, when my perimeter of the external guy, of the unique hole containing the infinite component, drops by L, then I am enclosing a Boltzmann map which has a size roughly L squared. So if I look at En, I see something like that. These guys, this drop, are roughly of size n to the 2/3. That's my scaling limit. You remember, of the perimeter delta En, you should renormalize by n 2/3. You see these jumps. Such a jump corresponds to an event like that. I'm swallowing a part of my boundary. Where is the orange? Swallowing a part of my boundary that makes a drop in my perimeter, and this drop is this guy. Let's call this guy K. So when I have a drop in my perimeter, that means that I have an increase in my volume, no partial here, of order K squared. So to your opinion, what is the correct scaling here? What is at least the volume of En? By n, I have a drop of my perimeter of size n to the 2/3, which corresponds to filling in a Boltzmann map of the proper perimeter, meaning that it has a volume n to the 4/3. So actually, at least this guy is of order n to the 4/3. And actually, that's the good order of magnitude. the largest jump is comparable to the sum of all the jumps. So theorem, and I'm not giving a proper, there are scaling limits for these guys as well, but I don't want to annoy you with that. But take-home message is this. The perimeter is n to the 2/3, and the volume is n to the 4/3 for any pinning exploration under this measure. Okay? So that will be our starting point next week to study, finally, I would say, the metric structure of this guy. That's it for today, right? 4 o'clock.